back to this lab, just to kind of remember what we're doing here. So for me, I have this like main.py file, right? And it has these two kind of main, these two functions really like run the whole thing, all right? So we have this retrieve and write pages, okay? And you can see that this takes arguments of position, location, and then the number of pages. So it would be like data engineer, New York City, right? And then the number of pages is like, when you go to Indeed.com, right, it has like, many pages of positions for you. And this, you can see this returns, or should return at least, this list of file names. So the list of file names, if you take a look at it, it's like retrieve and write for every one of the pages, and then save the data right in this data folder, and then keep track, append all the file names, and then return them. So that's the first thing, is like it returns a list of file names, and then you basically take these file names and you want to write them to the database. So for each one of the file names, for file name and file names, what I do is call file2db. All right. This was my way of flattening. Do you guys know what that means? Like if you have a list, if you have like a list of lists, we can actually show it. If you all are looking at this line right here, and I think I just Googled this, or like asked ChatGPT how to do this. But let's say you have like a list of lists, so you have like 1, 2, and then 3, 4, and this is my array. Then I was asking, well, how do we flatten this thing? And apparently you can do like sum. So you want to remember you can add lists. So I guess we're adding this. I hope this works to an empty list. Oh, and that actually worked. You see that? So remember, like you can add, if you add two lists, right? Oh, it should just return a new list. Okay. And I guess what this is doing, what I think what this is doing is because you can take a list of elements like 3 and 4, right? And then that will give you 7. And then you add another one, right? Like if you just do 3 and 4, that will give you 7, right? It's going to add these components. But so if you do a list of lists, well, what does that mean? Well, that means add up these two elements, okay? And what's the result of adding two lists? Adding two lists like combines them together. The same way adding two strings combines them together. So I must have done something wrong. And then I broke it. Let's see. So let's do this again. Yeah, so there's the array. We'll sum the array. See if I just do that. I guess it doesn't work. Oh, and that's why they have this empty list. Because I think they're saying, okay, always know that you're adding like a list within a list. I guess this forces it somehow. I'm not quite sure to tell it that what you're doing is you're adding the data type that you're adding is a list. Let's see. So it's setting the last argument, I guess, as a list. I don't know. Anyway, that's what I'm doing. All I did was I just Googled, like, how do I flatten a list in Python? Because it's not super easy, and they gave me this as an option. Okay, so that's the idea, is we get a bunch of, like, file names, like a list, like nested lists of file names, and so here I'm flattening it. All right, so then when I was prepping for this, it was like, okay, I wanted to, run this thing, right, which is going to retrieve and write the pages. And we know like the whole process involved in retrieving, right? We have to scrape it and feed it to ChatGPT, and turn it to JSON, write it, and then save it to the database. And so like then I ran it, and I actually ran into like a little of a silent bug, which is like the best kind of bug. So let's see if we can reproduce it. Okay, so you could see, right, like one thing, we don't have an error. But out of the gate, you can tell it's just occurring too quickly. to actually have done anything, or that's what I felt like. So then the next question is like, how do we figure this out? You want to, it feels like it could be happening anywhere. So one thing you could do is you could start by just looking at, like the result, right? Like we know that this data is part of the process, retrieve and write pages. So you could just start by looking at like the text documents, and see like were there actually any documents written there. The other thing that you probably want to do is just put breakpoints, and you want to put breakpoints like starting pretty broadly, meaning like if it could be anywhere, you want to separate your code base, like just kind of do like a binary split, right? Like split your code base in two. Well, how do you do something like that? Well, one, we already said that there's these two processes, retrieve and write pages, and here. So I mean, you could put like a breakpoint here, and like even see like what does file names equal, and then there's probably nothing, is my guess. And then you could also put a breakpoint here. So what does it mean to put a breakpoint here? Well, like this is the nice thing about having well-written code is that we go through this list, and each step we call retrieve and write. So I could put a breakpoint like here, or I could put it inside, or even like in the retrieve and write, this is again also kind of broken up pretty nicely. It's like retrieve and write is involved in like retrieving text and writing to the file. So you could imagine putting a breakpoint here too, just like put some around so we can start to get a sense of where is our bug. Okay, let's call Python 3 main.py again and see. Okay, so here's where we wound up. I'm like cheating a little bit because I just solved this bug before class. But we're right here, I think. Let's see, Indeed Scraper line 87. So we're actually right here. Okay. The bug is in front of us, believe it or not. I'm highlighting it. I don't know if any of us see it. So how will we figure this out? It's pretty tricky. So what I did was I was like, all right, let's just evaluate this thing. Like, let's evaluate this, So you can evaluate this. And that's the nice thing about breakpoints, right? It's passing these through. We see range 7515. At first, this looks pretty good to me. It's like, okay, I want to go 0 to 15, steps of 15, right? Like 15 jobs at a time. And then we could like loop through it, right? Like another thing we could do maybe is instead of for I in range, let's just see what I is each time. Right? And I'll just print out I. And that's an error, right? Because it's not giving us like, this should be like 0, 15, whatever. So now what's the issue probably? So let's take a look at this again. Right? And I think the issue is, like I thought we're going, 0 to 75 by 15, but we need that 0, right? We need something like that. And now we could see if that works better. For I in range, and then do the 0, and that's better, right? So then just implement the fix, just copy and paste it basically. The range is 0, and that should fix it. Right, we can remove our breakpoints. Let's just like look for them. Do we have any more? Looks like we got them all. And then in the main.py, we also don't have it. And we can exit. So when I run this again, it looks like it's working. I'm not sure, actually, now that like on second thought. But one thing I notice about it is it does not do a good job, in my opinion, of like logging information. Like right now, it's not so bad. We can see it scrape through everything. But now it's just pausing. It's just like waiting. And so we don't know at this point, like, is it stuck? But it's probably not stuck, but more than that, we don't know if it's actually like having the desired result. So this is where logging could probably, be pretty helpful. At least I have this, like this warning is actually pretty useful because I know that at least I got to this line 53, right? And now it's adding and saving everything. So it feels like that's good, but again, like it would just be nice if we logged stuff. The other thing to remember is here we're doing this like synchronously, right? Like I'm kicking this off But remember, we're going to want to do this in Prefect, and if like we wake up and there's no data saved, did the like 1,000 different things could have happened. So, you could do not. You probably shouldn't do print statements. You can just Google how to do logging or ask ChatGPT. We can do like logging and then do like logging.info, or you can write. You should write to a log file. Something like that is useful. But then, of course, the other useful thing is we are moving to Prefect, right, which will do some of that saving, that logging for us, so we can go back and see what occurred. But perhaps we want even, additional logging. Like, for instance, maybe we want to, like, every 15 of these positions, perhaps we log it or log what we're saving or something like that, right? That way we can just see, is this thing actually working? All right, so that was the other thing that came to mind. Other things, right? So it did exit. It didn't throw any errors. The last thing is just like, it's been a little while, right, since we've done this. So when you come back to a task after having worked on it for a little while, the first thing I recommend doing is just run PyTest, right? See, because your first failing test is where you should start. And that's the benefit. I guess I got a failing test. That's the benefit of writing tests, is like when you come in the next day, you just run the tests, see like where your error is, and pick it up there. Okay. All right. I think that's basically all I wanted to cover. After you do, passing these tests, you still have to implement the pipeline, and then you want to, boot up the backend API, probably with Flask, Flask run, right? If this thing actually runs your application, and then you want to connect the front end as well. Okay? Cool. And this is the app that eventually we'll be deploying to AWS and Dockerizing. All right, so it's a nice project to complete. Anything